Making news this morning, the government and opposition are continuing their stoush over offshore processing. Immigration Minister Chris Bowen has released details of the government's request for a meeting, while the opposition's immigration spokesman Scott Morrison says he's happy to talk, but only if the government puts forward a fresh proposal.
Sitting squarely in the middle is the Greens. Christine Milne is the acting Greens leader, and she joins us now from Hobart. Christine Milne, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Virginia.
Now, the elder of the Liberal Party, Philip Ruddock, is suggesting today a way that this deadlock between the opposition and the government might be solved, saying that if Malaysia agreed to a no-returns policy to countries that persecute people, then the coalition could get on board with a solution that involves Malaysia. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that isn't a solution or an appropriate response. As we know, people seeking asylum can't work in Malaysia, so they are treated very badly, and they are working illegally. They're often bashed in very poor conditions, and that is an inappropriate response. We can't be talking about sending people to countries that haven't signed the Refugee Convention. But I do think it's time that all political parties sat around the table, and my experience of the Multi-Party Climate Committee is one thing that I think the Prime Minister could consider, actually setting up a process for all political players in the Parliament, all parties and the independents, to sit down and talk about what is an appropriate response and how we might actually engage this in a whole-of-government way, including getting Foreign Affairs talking with the Indonesians about the whole people smuggling networks.
Well, that is going on, and of course there's been long-standing links between Australia and the Indonesians, the Indonesian police and our federal police on the ground there, attempting to disrupt that and to have intelligence on the ground about that. So one could argue that it's working or it's not working, but that link's already been established, Christine Milne. So if the Greens are ruling out a country like Malaysia, if you were part of such a round table, what countries or what other countries would you then seriously consider as part of an offshore processing agreement?
Well, the Greens don't think offshore processing is the right way to go.
That's right. That's why
the Refugee Convention.
Look, I'm only jumping in here for this reason. That's right, and that's why I ask you that question, because I just wonder why you put forward that round table idea when there really isn't another country that you'd be prepared to support anyway.
Well, the discussion ought not to be about which country can we identify that we send people who are seeking asylum to go to in order to be dealt with somewhere else. The question is, in a world where millions of people are now moving on a regular basis to escape poverty, but also to escape war and persecution, we have got a situation where Australia takes fewer people in a year than Italy takes in a weekend. So you've got this issue where we need to work out how to deal with it in our region. Now that means to have a serious discussion across all parties as to how that could work. And the reason I mention the collaboration with Indonesia is Saeed Abbas has now been named as one of the people possibly involved in organising this boat. Now he was arrested and is meant to be extradited to Australia for his role in previous organisation of this kind. Now if he's been arrested in Indonesia, how is it that he's been able to be involved in organising this latest boat, if indeed he has? And what did our own intelligence services know about that? I think when you go look at it, what we can see is that under offshore processing, we lost several boats at sea. Hundreds of people have drowned, 353 on the Civex. We lost 3 other boats, including the one off Christmas Island last year, and 2 in between where there was no trace. So that was when offshore processing was on the table, was in operation. Hundreds of people drowned. We've lost hundreds again. This is a tragedy, but we need to have all political parties saying, right, we need a regional solution, we need better collaboration and cooperation with the Indonesians, we need a bigger humanitarian intake in Australia. Our humanitarian intake is the lowest in 30 years.
Yep.
We should take more.
Well, Christina, look, I accept those points that you made earlier about, the numbers as compared to, say, European countries that take these people. people. But you're mentioning there again a regional solution without actually talking about in specifically which country and how. According to the Greens, don't dangerous boat journeys have to be discouraged? And isn't a well-organised regional arrangement the only key to that, as we saw happen, for example, in the aftermath of the Vietnam War? Otherwise, you have people still attempting to come here because they can get here and there's no actual regional solution in place.
Well, certainly it's a terrible tragedy when you see people coming on boats and drowning, but the point I'm making is they will keep coming on boats, whether there is onshore or offshore processing. And I just make the point that the queue system in, if you want to call it a queue, in Malaysia, would take about 53 years if you were at the back of the queue before you were actually processed. In Indonesia, from Indonesia, Australia takes only about 60 people a year, 60. So if you get to those countries, you would think to yourself, I can't stay here and wait. I am never going to get to Australia. And so that is the driver. Plus, you've still got your problems in Afghanistan, in Iran, Iraq and so on. You are going to have refugees. What we need is a discussion about how best to manage it in compliance with our international obligations under the UNHCR and as the rule of law. Those things are critical.
I've got a couple of questions for you, one on a different topic, so I just quickly want to bring this part of the discussion to an end if I can, Christine Milne. Just to get clarity on this, would the Greens then stand in the way of any bipartisan agreement that was reached on offshore processing?
Well, the Greens don't support offshore processing, and we would not support sending asylum seekers to countries that are not signatories to the United Nations Refugee Convention.
OK, but if they were signatories to that convention, would that third country be acceptable?
We want to have a look at anything the government puts on the table, and we'd certainly like to be part of a round-table discussion, but certainly let's have the rule of law as the basis for it.
Just a final question on another issue. The Greens have released a discussion paper looking at gambling and health, and you're calling for a discussion on medical intervention into problem gambling specifically. Can you explain that to us, please?
Yes, Senator Richard Di Natale has put out a discussion paper. He's done a lot of work as a doctor in the fields of preventative health and particularly looking at addiction. And the study shows that there has been some success using a drug to control or to help assist addicts not get the satisfying rush, if you like, that they get from binge drinking. And the suggestion is that maybe it would work in terms of stopping the satisfaction compulsive gamblers get as they stand there feeding the poker machines. So it's a discussion paper asking what people think about that. And it'll be very interesting to see how the community responds to it.
It will indeed. Christine Milne, thanks for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go.